transparency and focus on how systems and processes are improved to the extent that we are not in a place where we see unprecedented level of complaints and residents trying to get their voices heard, but we see something that is far more responsive and predictive to maintaining and improving homes. If I take one example, which is complaints about windows, I am seeing an emerging and concerning trend where you are seeing complaints about windows where residents are saying that my highlight blocks are close to getting around windows are working well. They are very concerned about the safety of our children. And in some cases, the system and the landlord is responsible for saying, we recognise that, we recognise the repairs that we've done, it will be done in 2026. Because that's when our major work will happen. That's when our planned work will happen.
So there's no room to make change there with that system. But that brings us a bit onto architecture, design. Jack Pringle, let me turn to you. I mean, certain materials pass certain tests in this report, but not others. What do you take from that?
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Can I just step back a bit and tell you a bit how the building regulations work in this country? They used to be very restrictive, and we were actually, before 1984, I would sit down with the Act of Parliament, which would tell me exactly how to design everything. And then everything changed. So the new regulations themselves are really skinny down. So for instance, on staircases, they say they should be appropriate to avoid people gaining access about the buildings, nothing more. There are then a load of approved documents that say if you design a staircase in this way, we will approve it. You don't have to do that. You can do it another way. And
There's too much room for maneuver.
well, let's not go there with the bar water, because what this does allow is innovation, and that was the idea of these more flexible regulations. You were smiling now, you're smiling like that, but you're also a bit cross about the course, weren't you? For those who weren't watching you before, why did you say the course in this record was appalling?
Well, I think it's in the context of innovate rather than the actual the course. I think maybe you've got lots of involvement in translation. I did warn people about getting to a grumpy old lady about the distance after that. I think it's really difficult to understand why, when the time on like 20 kilometres, we get 14 kilometres for a road time trial.
Yeah, you thought it was too short to show it off, wasn't it?
Absolutely, I think we were so far, like all our schools, had 20 minutes for a road time trial. Just so short, and everyone is capable across all the categories of road much further. We do as well in what happens to. So I think to have normally the parents of the longer races, you'll see the most challenging, if you like, and the longer races, the minimum races, the usually say the work success is to get any of them. You see it in West Yorkshire, there's a relatively short time now, but it's, going up the side of the mountain and the elevation gaining from, 5-6 degrees in places, that's short distance. So I think it's really important that we see in the future the courses that showcase Harrisburg in the way it should be, because you don't get the attention at the World Championships, at the World Cup events, and when you want to show the world what's possible, demonstrating young children who are looking out and thinking what's out there for me in my future career, maybe in sport. You want to be able to show that it's it is the event that we're praying for, and 14 kilometres just helps you do it.
Worry not, though, Sarah. You are a wonderful and inspiring example for children who are watching that event, and many of us who are daunted by what we have to do. Sarah, so congratulations again.
Yes, huge congratulations. A 7:45, it's time now for Thought for the Day, and the speaker this morning is Michael Hurley, Professor of Literature and Theology at the University of Cambridge.
Good morning. While in Rome last week, I read about a would-be burglar. He was caught after stopping to read a book on Greek mythology. He found it on a bedside table. The author of the book has since offered to send the thief a copy so he can finish it in prison. This story reminded me of an incident in Buenos Aires in 2010, when a man became so enchanted by the poetry in a bookshop that robbing the back into his crime. The owner found him the next morning still reveling in the shop's
by the power of art itself. C.S. Lewis once wrote about how we don't really want to see it. We want somehow to be united with it, to pass into it, to receive it into ourselves, to bathe in it, to become part of it. One way of understanding this is in terms of the Christian concept of common grace, the idea that God's presence permeates the whole world, extending to all of humanity, regardless of their faith or relationship with God. Common grace is central to our joy, but also to restrain the effects of sin. All of that might sound rather fuzzy. But before we dismiss such high claims,
training with issues around regulation and
Surely you must have been around so I know that's up a report and so, but Keir Starmer says it's going to be a moment for the country. He's stating a major moment here in his early days of his premiership. Surely you can make some commitments this morning in light of 7 years of getting to this point.
well, there has already been changes that have been made. There is a new regulation now with the Building Safety Act, and there is much more to do, and I think that's the point that Keir is making. And in a broader point, you know, what Keir was saying as Prime Minister is you have the scandals, we've had the contaminated blood, we've had Horizon, we've had Hillsborough, and time again, Prime Minister is standing up to apologise for systemic failures, and that's why we've got to address how is it in Britain, we've had in offices, that we can have the level of failure that we're seeing. You know, the Prime Minister set out the view with Hatter in the speech, and there's been a number of changes made, but there is a question for all politicians, which is what the Prime Minister said yesterday when we spoke about working with the whole House, about how can we keep ending up in these circumstances where successive governments are apologising for things that, quite frankly, are abhorrent and shouldn't be happening.
We can ask those questions. We want leadership from our politicians. We don't need those questions to be asked in that way necessarily. There's an action and a clamour for that. Can I just get to a couple of points on that? You talked about speeding up remediation. Those buildings today with unsafe cladding, what is the government's timeline for getting rid of all unsafe cladding?
Well, today we've still got, out of the 630 buildings that have been identified currently, only 50% of them are currently in remediation, and 29% of them are completed. So there's still
for the
way
timeline.
too much to do.
Didn't
Over
ask you
400
for the
legal notices and legal action has been
Call him,
taken
call him.
against these buildings.
也很好，这种东西。
To take remediation, but it's not good enough. You know, my commitment is that I'm pulling together the industry and our departments and looking at where the gaps are, whether that's through legislation. You know, the money is there, and there is money available to remediate, and these companies also have money, including those, and they cannot get away with not taking action in remediation time. So our remediation acceleration plan, which was also will be about how we can speed up that process. It is incredibly frustrating that 7 years on, we have 50% of the buildings that have been identified as needing this remediation, and it hasn't even started that process. What is that? I haven't got a definitive timeline yet, but 7 years on is not acceptable. And, you know, one of the first things I did when I was came into the department was review what has happened. We had fires down the portfolios, and again, I brought the regulators and the fire safety chiefs around the table and said, this is just not going to work.
Have you not had time when you don't know what you can do? You don't have time to think about how you can do it.
Well, I can't give you a timeline because there's a number of outstanding ways to which we will have to see, whether that's some type of legislation, whether that's around government framework, and, you know, about how we can get these companies and these building owners.
Thousands of people, hundreds of thousands, they're not having someone in their safety nets, but still living in homes with safe incidents were going off 7 years ago. They are looking to you as the honest
会
advisor
有不会
to say when are it's put to deadline.
啊？
Which is why my remediation acceleration
Then what?
plan is about how I can
No.
speed up that process. I can't, you know, I'm always straight. I can't give a timeline today, but what I can say is that it is an incredibly slow process at the moment. 7 years on, and that's not acceptable. Well, it's because there's a number of things
should people go to prison? Well, one.
That would be I
This people says we are sensitive now that we're involved in the health incident, and people agree, the survivors have said that you can't feel like you just said there was no way in.
I think the issues that these survivors and the friends and the investigate is the justice delayed, justice denied, and I think the refugees doing everything they can to get to a position of investigation being concluded and their outcomes so that people can see it's not an issue that I should be commenting on in terms of what I think should happen.
But
Because
you're not
at the end of the
necessarily
day,
talking, I just wonder if for you what's happened and what was reported. This report was completely clear that the death of those 72 people, men, women and children, could have been avoided, should be avoided. Does it feel right to you that there might be a case where nobody ends up going to prison?
there should be consequences, but that is an ongoing live legal investigation, which the Prime Minister was very clear in his speaker of about being careful not to do anything that would impact on that investigation. I want to support the Met Police in doing their investigation and concluding that as quickly as they possibly can, and then for them to take the action because they are the police and the Crown Prosecution Service to take the action that they need to take to bring
What do they do
to
about
justice.
government? What does that mean? The inquiry concluded that governments ignored, delayed or disregarded concerns. What does that look like for justice for those people? The Liberal Democrat leader, Sarah Davies, said misconduct in public office should be investigated, tried and punished. What does punishment look like for government?
Well, again, the investigations that are being carried out will be carried out, and if there is answers for anyone involved in terms of criminality, the police will investigate that, including government. Well, that depends. It's the Met Police who are investigating, and they will be, any act of criminality. I'm sure the Met Police will be doing all they can to get to the bottom of it, but that's not something that I'm involved in. But I do think that the families deserve that justice, and they deserve it as quickly and as swiftly as they possibly can. And me, as the Secretary of State, looking at what's been done so far and looking at the next 58 recommendations to ensure that we do everything we possibly can to take this forward so we don't end up in the same circumstances again. I think, just finally, the thing that really struck me was the way in which the deregulation and profit and greed was put ahead of safety, and to me that is completely unacceptable. And as I said before, a government's first priority is to keep its citizens safe, and that is an important of my mind as a Secretary of State.
As a Secretary of State for Housing, in this respect, Development, Agreed and Deputy Minister, look forward to talking to you again. Thank you.
And that question about whether and when the victims of criminal receive justice is the question we ask on this week's episode of the Today podcast. I will for the long interview with the woman who was the MP at the time, who's got out of bed when the news broke and ran to Brentford Tower to see what was going on, never let go, is still a councillor of the area and knows the issues well. So it's very personal reflections on her as she remembers that terrible morning. To listen to the Today podcast, just search for it anywhere. It's on BBC Sounds. The time is 26 minutes past 8. Benjamin Netanyahu is under huge pressure to agree a ceasefire with Hamas. Pressure at home as well as from abroad. In Israel, tens of thousands have taken to the streets after 6 more hostages who the Israeli had hoped to rescue were found to be murdered. Last night he held a news conference and argued
They
that
weren't
he
murdered,
wouldn't
they were
compromise his
executed.
country's security simply to
Because
get
they
that
were by
ceasefire,
terrorist
insisting he wouldn't order Israeli forces to leave the border between Gaza and Egypt.
I don't leave in order to come back in when I know that we're going to come back in, and it's not going to take another 24 years to come back in. And God knows what parts will have, how many more massacres, how many more kidnappings, how many more houses, how many more rapes. It's not going to happen. So people said, you have to stay.
即係離開呢應該係嘛？
This will kill the deal. And I say, such a deal will kill us. And it won't kill us. That will.
佢一定話要
Jeremy Bell, our international editor, was watching that news conference.
即係白
He was struck by that last phrase, there won't be a deal. It's not all we have on
佢有個
the
眼中啊，咁就會冇人買。
I think that's about to know, and the focus at the moment is on that strip of land you're talking about, Gaza and Egypt.
唔係，佢會飲水嘅話就唔會有買。
And yeah, Khalil al-Hayya is negotiating. Hamas said to the Arab and Al Jazeera a couple of days ago, that without withdrawing from Gaza, there will be no agreement. So there you are. Now they're negotiating to try and find ambiguous language that both sides can grab. But the thing is, they have other differences as well. For example, how many Palestinian prisoners are exchanged for Israeli hostages. And ambiguous language only works when both sides want to find a way through. It seems pretty clear that neither side really wants to find a way through at the moment, except on their absolute terms and not through a compromise.
And can Netanyahu continue to
但
define
哥今日
pressure at home?
爸爸接咗細啲，唔係接咗你，跟住接細
That
啲，
he can just say, look,
即係
I hear you,
即係
I
普
watch
通嘅
those
時間
protests, but I'm not
放。
listening.
Yeah,
Fairly
well, the
elaborate.
Israeli parliament is in recess until the end of October.
咁要接細 B B 啊嘛，
Has
我
the
邊度揾你
support
咁？
of, and in fact, depends on
定係我去 library 揾你啊？接唔
the
使
number
B
of
B 之後，
hard right, extremist, Jewish nationalist politicians who have
Okay.
as well taken to social media. Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's one of the leaders of that,
Eritrea, who drowned on Tuesday, the river. The timing of its destruction seems unfortunate at best. With the help of a translator listening on a phone line, I speak to a young Eritrean man who tells me he knew some of those who died, but who still hasn't given up on his own dream of reaching the UK. Thank you. Well, what did he say, please?
Okay, he said, of course we feel terrible about this, for all of us who are here, because, these people, they're like our brothers. We're all brothers out here.
So what next for this decades-long, ever-evolving crisis? Olivier Barbahan is the mayor of a resort town called Le Portel, where the bodies were brought ashore this week.
When the weather is good, you can see the English coast from here. And you can imagine how these migrants don't want to stay in France. Some have traveled across Europe on foot. They just want to get to a country where they have family, where they speak the language, and where they know they can find work easily. Here in France, people still welcome the migrants with compassion and kindness. But if this goes on, I think attitudes will change.
My sense is that they're changing already, that people are losing patience with the authorities on both sides of the channel, sceptical that we are anywhere close to a comprehensive solution to stop the small boats and smuggling gangs, and to end the misery that now clings to this coastline like a sea fog.
Andrew Harding reporting there, listening to that report. Rod Laurie, familiar to us on the programme, of course, because of his work on that brilliant BBC4 Radio 4 podcast, To Catch a Scorpion, former soldier turned aid worker. And you, Rob, know very well of that route from Eritrea that we were hearing about there, don't you?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me on. I think I'm right in thinking these people came from the Keren region of Eritrea, and their usual route, their historical route, was to come through the Canary Islands and into mainland Spain. But there's several routes opened up now across the Mediterranean and up through Europe and into European countries and eventually into France to come to the UK.
But the conditions so bad there that they think is worth risking that terrible journey to get to the coast and then another one to get here to the UK.
Well, they don't always want to come to the UK. I mean, I've spoken to many of these people in Belgium and Germany and France, and usually they just want to get to somewhere that's safe, where they're accepted as people. The problem is now that the asylum cases are dropping off massively in Europe and being accepted. And, through over 10 years of investigating this with my colleague Sue Mitchell, what we see in the camps in northern France is that different nationalities from African nations, from Iran, from Iraq, from Afghanistan, they speak either German or Swedish And that's because they've been in those companies 2 or 3 years and they eventually have their second and third appeal denied. So, they're not going to go back to Eritrea or wherever they come from, their host nation, because of why they left. So their only option is now to go down to Northern France once again, put their hands into their lives into the hands of these organised criminal networks. And I think it's fair to say now that I have been on this program quite a few times, and I've been on different media stations talking about the same thing. I think it's fair to say now that this is become a problem that can be solved between governments working together. And I've been saying that drug dealers will always be drug dealers, human traffickers will always be human traffickers. You ain't going to stop that.
But what can you do then, Rob? Because when you describe that crackdown that's going on in many countries in Europe, of course, as it gets bad in one place, they try somewhere else. And there is always money to be made in helping them try somewhere else.
Altogether, we're looking at organised networks, so they are very organised networks that operate these smuggling of people. We need to work together as countries. We need safe passage, from Europe. I mean, the UK actually are quite low down on the amount of accepted asylum cases in terms of Europe. Germany take about, France take an awful lot. They're only getting impacted by media stations saying they're not doing enough. But we need to really come up with a plan where we can have either safe passage and put them into an area where they can have their asylum cases looked at either on mainland Europe or in the UK. Because without that, I would be back here. I was on the program for
You're going to keep coming back, Rob. You're going to keep coming back if it carries on like this. And we're grateful for you to. By the way, let me just remind people of that podcast. As you rightly said, it's your work with Sue Mitchell. We don't get this written in our scripts, ladies and gentlemen. It is a brilliant, brilliant podcast. It's not just called it. Please listen to what BBC sounds and what Roy thinks.
It is indeed, and at 13 minutes to 9, my next guest, I'm very happy to be able to introduce to you one of the most successful football coaches in the world. Alex Ferguson is a big fan of many others, and when she left Chelsea Women to cross the Atlantic earlier this year, she left a big hole in the game. I'm talking about Emma Hayes. She has amassed many domestic titles with that team, and at this summer's Paris Olympics, she guided her new squad, USA Women's National Football Team, to a gold medal.
The USA are celebrating because the 4-time gold medalist and now the 5-time gold medalist. There hasn't been eye-catching football at times from the USA at this Paris Olympic Games, but it's had the grit, the determination of an Emma Hayes side, and after just a couple of months in charge, Hayes has led the USA to success in her first major tournament.
And determination, Emma Hayes, new head coach of the United States Women's National Team and author of the new book, A Completely Different Game, My Leadership Playbook, joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome back to Brighton.
Yeah, no, it's lovely. The weather's gorgeous this morning.
Many congratulations on the gold. How does that feel?
That's surreal. And I've obviously hit myself every day thinking back. I was with my best mate yesterday and we talked about this since we were kids and played out that final in our own playgrounds a million times over. So going to the Olympics, I felt like I'd already been there. It's really nice.
And educators have never been united about it.
I mean, I don't know what people expect when it comes to those things, but
But it is, but the grit there, that's positive signals. That's what we talk about. It's about leadership. Also interestingly, in your book, I mentioned now Chelsea and America, you talk about leadership in training, which I find really interesting.
well, moving the training, you think about it like that when you're managing, I know now, the US 20 odd players and then about 5 staff. All of those interactions every day require work, and so often it's about listening to so many different things and all of that, and that there's a human cost, human toll, I think, when you are the leader, so it's essential surrounding people with so much better than me, not just in different areas of expertise, but being able to talk about otherwise, I think it's extremely important.
What's your technique then? What's your sort of
person share that session. Oh yeah, no, without question, and especially as I age, I realise the importance of making sure that I don't use my body doesn't get too heightened when it comes to preparing for games, and it's that recognition of what stresses how strength with a combination of just work and meditation. Sometimes meditation is just 30 minutes of not having to listen to anyone and like being a sort of meditation it's brilliant, and I've had a combination of coaches over the years, but I'm also essential staff, and so often what becomes a focus in sports environments is there's a focus on what to do for the players, but I think it's equally essential that we do it for the staff. And
You talked about your handicap coming to mind. You're very open as someone who saw a lot. You talked about your endometriosis diagnosis and consciousness strategies to move away from the game because of that. Is that something that you found that you were okay with talking about that sort of stuff? Why did you choose to do that?
Well, because I felt like having gone through years of undiagnosed and sometimes misdiagnosed situations, suffering in silence for me was probably the worst part. Suffering without knowledge, and I thought if there's one thing I could use my own platform for, I would be to discuss the inequalities in and around what's there available for me, and going through endometriosis and hysterectomy is something that was so painful for me to reflect on, because being in pain every day is exhausting, and trying to find solutions and self-solve, and that's why I've become so educated in and around what's best for a woman, is because that literature is not widely available, that resource is not there, so I had to learn myself.
Right, that sounds like a really painful now on that front, so I also appreciate you speaking out about that. How are you now?
Yes, I don't want to advocate going through a sudden menopause with a hysterectomy, but it certainly relieved me of chronic endometriosis. But then you have the other side of having to deal with what a sudden menopause is and all of the challenges with the loss of, in particular, I realised the importance of estrogen to our body, and realising you have to stay on top of those things. So you just have a different set of challenges, but chronic endometriosis is, without question, the hardest thing I've had to deal with in my life.
The game itself is obviously your joy, it's a passion, it gives you a lot. I'm sure we're really difficult spot with your mental health as well. But it's still got a long way to go when it comes to women and, people being accepted for their talent, not necessarily their sex. And I'm just looking at the fact that the England men's head coach is open. I don't think you're going for that at the moment with a new job, tell me otherwise, but do you think actually one of the big frontiers is for women
喂，
to coach?
你仲揸緊車？我依家去 Aldi 買水果，你有冇要買？
I think you need to get more owners in to ask them that question, because they're the people you have to ask that question to. I'm not the one who's in charge of that.
Do you not think they're ready for that?
You mean the owners?
Yeah.
你幾耐 WhatsApp 到啊？你覺得？
Otherwise it would have happened by now. But I've said this a million
一代
times
翻，
over.
我喺
A
Aldi。
female pilot, a female doctor, a female lawyer, a female banker. But you can't find a female coach working in the men's game, leading men. This shows you how much work there is to be done, and that's why for me it's about those that are in charge that you have to ask the question to. It's not about whether a coach.
And what do you think it is they've got against women being
膠袋洋葱，膠袋細洋
You
葱。
have to ask them that
But you're
question.
being around the atmosphere of this, being around that,
Okay.
those sexist remarks, those prejudices.
Yeah, just
Hi.
all of those things. I think it's been a place which has just been, the
Hawk
large
shoulder.
majority have been males in that situation, and often people don't think
Okay.
that maybe a female can manage the addressing them of
Right.
male characters. So,
Hawk shoulder 同埋膠袋細洋葱係
I
咪？
manage about 25 men every day.
冇啦嘛。
They're just the staff I
要唔要
work with.
要唔要我買？
It will be a very big struggle because it's an absolutely huge mountain.
when I first did the Olympics way back in 1976, there were 4 men to every female athlete at the Olympics. We're now at parity. But the IOC used this language of gender. Now, we can't say that we're at parity if we replace the word sex with gender, if anyone can identify into being in the female category. So we used to have sex screening at the Olympic Games, which is a 5-second swab to the inside of your cheek. I would love to see that brought back. When athletes were asked about it, 80+% wanted it kept, and the IOC still removed it. So me personally, I would like to see a female protected classification, just as we have with track and field athletics and cycling, like that across every sport at the Olympics. And if it's a matter of creating an open category rather than calling it male, so that anyone can identify into that category. And what no one ever talks about is trans-identifying females who are on testosterone. They don't seem to matter. At the moment, they have nowhere to go, because they can't raise in the female category because they would be banned for taking synthetic testosterone. And no one is including them in, the men's category or calling it anything else. So if we create an open category, you would have somewhere where everyone would be able to race.
Yeah, Sharon kind of throws me out a little bit with her terminology. I wish you would just say trans men and trans women, which is a bit more straightforward. I'm hearing that Sharon's trying to think of solutions, but I just conflicts with a lot of my understanding based on facts and science and things that I've read. So I'm trying to take everything she's saying on board, but it's doesn't really I'm listening.
Yeah. Can you take one more question?
I mean, I can, but I feel like Sharon's really probably answered these in terms of what she said. But do you have a burning kind of open question to understand Sharon's position better? Sharon, you say you can't change biological sex. How do you define someone's biological sex, male or female?
Gamete. So whether your body was designed to actually, as you say, small or a large gamete, there's no third sex. Hermaphrodite doesn't exist, non-binary doesn't exist. You might identify not with a stereotype of what a male or a female is in society's version of it, which unfortunately right now females is getting narrower and narrower. But human biology, there's not a single person in the world that's ever changed their biological sex. So has gone from producing a small gamete to producing a large gamete, a sperm or an egg.
I guess what I would say is that even back as far as the 20s and 30s, there was a lot of science and research being done to try and understand the vagueness between biological sex, gender, and I don't.
But what are you hearing Sharon wants? Because you've asked her a question.
Well, Sharon is saying you cannot physiologically change your biology.
But it is scientific fact, Ollie, whether you like it or no. I mean, I could give you a list of the best biologists in the world who will tell you exactly the same thing.
You can't. I agree with what you're saying insofar as you can't.
In the 1800s, they named the genus Magis cicada. They knew there was something magic about this.
17 years. I mean, I didn't even realize that bugs could live that long. And then you think, oh, and they're underground for almost all of that as nymphs, and they're feeding on the sap of the roots of trees.
Imagine being a child and you wake up and you're underground. There's that moment where it's like, what am I doing here? I'm in the dark. I'm Peter Cooper, cartoonist and citizen scientist. For the last 4 years, I've been working on a book, and it's about the intersection between insects and humans, and I had dedicated an entire chapter to the cicada. And I have the cicada discovering itself underground, sort of like confused, and then talking to the tree, and the tree is sort of like the parent, and the cicada is kind of like a scared child being underground and is comforted by the tree.
Maybe it's very, it's like chocolatey and warm, and there's lots of things to eat. It's like a wound.
And the tree is basically calming the sad young cicada down, the nymph, and letting it know that it will have enough food. I will be here the whole time. Don't worry about that.
Maybe we can feel other nymphs nearby. We can sense that the brood is underground now. We're all here. We're checking in with each other occasionally. Yep, you're here. Hey, you're here too.
We're all in the right spot.
The fact that's so amazing is you have every 17 years the cicadas come out. But most years they're coming out somewhere. There are these overlapping broods. Some are 13-year broods, some are 17-year broods.
You know, a lot of the broods seem to get more coverage when they cover a larger expanse, and especially when they involve suburban or urban areas.
And brood 10 is most famous because, as all of our t-shirts say, it's the new because the numbers are phenomenal.
So brood 10 is involved in a lot of major cities, all in Washington, D.C., which is now
Maryland's the center all around those areas.
also Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Nashville. People there, they don't have a lot of cities watching. So what they finally think about it is, whoa, here's this thing. It's been a generation. There's a convention out there, and they're called brood with capital B. And then they're brood that were always done in Roman. This is why people know the Romans call it X. The Roman numeral 10 resembles the capital X. I am amazed at how many they want to become prefix made it more mysterious.
The X is the most inspiring, most scary. When does it come out? Let's see. It came out in 2021.
2021, we go back to
2004.
go back to 2004, 1987. Go back to 1977.
17 years. It's a generational thing. I've had the opportunity to talk with at 87 on this whole thing. I remember distinctly in 1936, the cicada landed on Cartersville, and she knocked off his woman. And 17 years later, she's had a daughter of her own, young daughter. She's taking her out and showing her the cicadas. 7 years later, she's got a granddaughter doing the same thing. She's no longer with us. But I don't think that still tells that story. But it will keep them, their mother, their grandmother, and their granola still alive in their memory.
Brood X is as far north as New Jersey, but not really New Jersey, just Princeton, New Jersey. Princeton has a famous university. It's easy to joke that it's just another crowd of 17-year-olds.
This is the front campus of Princeton University. It's small, 2 acres or so. There are probably 30 trees on it. The oldest go back at least 2 centuries. It has traditionally been used for commencement at Princeton, and every 17 years, the cicadas are trying to occupy the same space. Right now, the class of 1970, and I graduated along with a couple dozen cicadas.
I am a great deal of well, number of graduate faculty, graduation. There was great turmoil in the United States over the Vietnam War on facts. Long history of how interference on the roads. This came to a head in the spring of 1970 because of the bombing of Cambodia by the United States. Kent State University in Ohio, May 4th, 1970, a component of the National Guard troops fired our students.
And it was just like a flag in front of a bull. The students were apoplectic. Commencement 1970 was quite warm, and the warmth actually encourages the cicadas, as if they needed to be encouraged. So the cicadas were all over the place. They were all over the trees. They were all over your mother. They were all over anything you could imagine. Most of the senior class didn't wear caps or gowns. This is pretty urban. The idea was that instead of renting a cap and a gown, you would donate that to an anti-war cause of your choice. Okay? And so we wore white armbands instead that said Together for Peace on it.
I was the valedictorian and therefore given the opportunity to speak at graduation.
Ray Gibbons called people to conscience.
I was trying to indicate that the country was deeply divided and that there were very few voices that were advocating to bridge that gap.
I was down around in here, so I was looking at an angle up at the main podium in the center, but also I was looking straight at Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan was here to pick up his first ever honorary degree from anywhere, and he was just as enamored of the cicadas as everybody else, and wrote a song about it later called "The Day of the Locusts." So when the sun shows up, there are all of these people trying to guess who's the locust and all of this. Whereas as much as anything he's ever written, it's a literal retelling of the day of our graduation. Cicadas sang for everyone, not just me.
How do they know when is the right moment to emerge? It's still a mystery. All of a sudden they know it's time to go. It's time to tunnel upwards to the light. And that mystery really pulls me in, because it reminded me of the fact that when my daughter was born, that my midwife couldn't tell me, whether it was my body that was going to decide or whether it was the baby's body that was going to decide what was the right moment to come out.
And you can almost feel the day. It's a nice warm day, early May. And I remember I looked out on my patio and there were things moving all over the patio. And it was these nymphs. And they're about the size of your thumb, your first joint on your thumb. They immediately go out of the ground and they try to find something to go up. Because the next part, it's time for them to shed their last nymphal skin and develop into adults.
And I never cease to enjoy the progress of the cicada crawling up the tree, walking in its tarsi. You watch slowly as the thorax splits open, the white adult starts to crawl, they pull themselves out. White, gleaming white, glowing red eyes. And then you see these large yellowish wings coming out. And then they expand their wings. The whole process takes them mostly now singing. It's marvelous to watch. Fly, and then they start to form. And then they start singing.
The motto of the cicada, as famously noted by Plato, sing, fly, mate, die. It's like the Bacchanalian, right? The main goal when they reach the adult stage is to obtain a mate. So it becomes an extreme competition. It's kind of like being a teenager where suddenly your brain goes conk and there's only one word in your head and it's sex. And so when I draw them, I basically have the adult, quote unquote adult. The sound that the cicada makes is actually just sex. Calling multitudes of red-eyed insects in the trees.
It's amazing, and it's just like 2 paragraphs in the middle of the book where she talks about the periodical cicadas be underground for 17 years. And she says, you know, what could they possibly be thinking about in all that time? And it just struck a chord with me, and I realized that Brood X, which is my local brood, would be coming up the following year. And it happened to synchronize also with this pandemic year, this dark year in our global history. So it seemed apt that they would be emerging possibly when we were also getting the vaccine and rolling up our sleeves and coming out of isolation.
There are 3 different species of 17-year cicadas, and they emerge in synchrony with each other.
Basically, the big 17 years cicada, the medium-sized one, and then the other one is a little bit smaller. All 3 of them have different calls.
The largest species, Septidescent, the other side, the output has black with these very big, wide orange bands.
The individual one goes,
And some people think that markings back to the flames, the Egyptians, the locusts, which is a misnomer for the cicada. And when you have a chorusing area, you just hear a tone. There's 2 smaller species of 17-year cicada. One is Cassidy. It's all black on the underside of the abdomen, and it's called a series of hooks and buzz.
Cassidy goes like an alien, District 9, like that. So what do you do with that? They figure out how to synchronize with that. They have to be heard through the barrel, so they synchronize together. So millions of them you hear.
And then Magicicada septiceptula. Its call is a bunch of clicks with a sort of line down in the front. It sounds almost like a rotary sprinkler.
Septula has a rhythm. There's only 3 people going at once. Three musical strategies to stand out from the others. 3 different musical elements. Who's got the rhythm? Who's got the washing noise? Who's got the tone? Who's got the drum? My name's David Rothenberg. I play music with animals.
David Rothenberg is interested in interspecies collaboration. And I first encountered him because of his work with cicadas. He plays clarinet with the cicadas, and he invites other musicians to come out and play as well.
So Anissa George wrote me somehow out of the blue saying she wanted to come and play.
And he responded right away.
Yes, please come.
He said, I'll be in Princeton, come along. I put my 5-year-old in the car with some snacks, and we found them right away. I said to Maria, we brought these little shakers and things along, and she kept saying, but now can I play? But now can I play? So I picked them up and I asked if that was okay, and David was like, oh, absolutely, like join the percussion.
I welcomed everyone in. I wanted all kinds of people in. Some people were like fancy professional jazz musicians. Some people weren't musicians at all. You're all part of this. So let's do it.
So we joined in and played a little bit with the cicada band that had congregated there. There were so many cicadas there. They were really singing their best.
Yeah, the incredible thing is to be surrounded by millions of cicadas. It's really a sense of humility. You feel so tiny yourself. Just one more sound. How do you relate to that?
And it's about listening, right? And it's about humbling yourself so that you're not taking the whole spotlight. It's not all about you. It's not all up in your head. It's not all about your fancy moves.
You can contribute by adding your own or a rhythm. But you're not the center of the one tiny sound.
And that's what I was trying to say to Ruya when she joined in. Like, it's about listening. You gotta listen to all these musicians here. You listen to yourself internally. Like, what is it you desire to add? And then you listen to the cicadas.
We all were emerging. It was 2021. Maybe some sort of normality was in the future. We're emerging from this lockdown, this time of restriction. And it was great to have the cicadas be a part of that.
Yeah, I think I've been really hungering on many levels to be community. To be in community with people that celebrate and have a kind of reverence for all living things. Bria, when she joined in, I could see that she was taking it really seriously, even though she was just 5 at the time. She was really trying to listen, and it was it's really my hope for her, you know, like when I think about what I want to do.
Women's safety, another big topic for us. How are you going to make women feel safe, not just on the streets, but within their own homes?
So we've been clear, we want to see an end to all violence against women and girls, and we've got a very clear programme within our programme for government, and that's committed to strengthening violence against women, domestic abuse, sexual violence, and we've got a strategy that is very clear about what needs to be done within what time frame.
The latest Welsh Government annual report into violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence between 22 and 23 found that one of the most pressing issues faced by victims and survivors is the accessibility and availability of support services.
Well, I think that is something certainly that we've been trying to develop, and what we're trying to do is we've got a blueprint approach where we're trying to work with non-devolved organisations and just bringing organisations together. And of course, the other aspect of that is mental health. So we've really strengthened our mental health support within Wales. We've got a ring-fenced budget for mental health in Wales. 10% of our entire budget in health is spent on it. We have a 111 press 2 system so that anybody has those issues, they can just pick up the phone and they can get an immediate response and immediate support. So we have been strengthening that support, particularly for we've improved our waiting times for particular children with mental health issues.
One of the things that came up during the election campaign was a number of female politicians speaking up about their own safety whilst campaigning. Do you feel safe?
I haven't felt threatened yet, but I'm very aware that the kind of noises on social media are quite aggressive, quite violent in their tone, but I haven't had that experience. But as a principal, I just don't use social media to protect yourself from that. Those things, but it can be quite difficult to, especially when taking on board all of these things. So I've coached it, and people are obviously using it on my behalf to protect yourself from some of that. Well, I think people are support yourself. You're fairly lucky, but it's more about, just questioning every decision you make. And you have to make decisions each time. And, every time you make a decision, you're going to question it. I think huge confidence in your abilities. I think it's really important that you read some of it is about political instability, go in depth and obviously follow the natural history. But every time you make a decision, you are shutting down that
We started talking about your growing up in quite a political household. You went off and you worked in TV for a bit, and you worked in a management company. Were you always going to end up here? Were you always going to come back to politics?
Yeah, I think that really was. I was always quite interested in young age. But I went to International Sixth College, and broadened my view on politics in the world. So I started out on a political journey in the years.
like feel like actually I think back to 15 years was probably the incident of part. So I deliberately went to work in an energy company. I wanted to know the business thing, why do they invest, why don't they invest. I'm hoping to bring all of that to the table now and put it into work.
Finally, the Senate opens on the 16th of September, less than 2 weeks away. You haven't yet announced any spoilers?
Yeah, but it will become continuous. I'll have to yeah, I'm excited about what the opportunities are around the economy of Wales in terms of share our London, what we need
You'll be getting in touch with what we started the program with. We're going to be talking about it despite being a long-time women's activist, says someone else, I have never found it easy to talk about my sexual feelings. My upbringing has a lot to ask for. Spongy flesh, sores, wandering wombs and virtuous virgins, women and their bodies have been described in many ways over the centuries, from the comical to the bizarre to the downright dangerous. Here to tell us more is Helen King, Professor of Classical Studies at the University, whose new book, Immaculate Forms, looks at how women's bodies have been shaped and understood by scientific theories and religious beliefs throughout history, and often by men. Helen, thank you very much. Lovely to have you here. The book covers a vast range of time, going right back to ancient Greece and coming up to the present day, but you split it into 4 sections: breasts, clitoris, hymen, and womb. Why did you decide to divide it into these parts?
Well, I started off thinking what makes a woman and what are women told to do with their bodies. And I was thinking of all sorts of things like voice and hair and clothing. But then the more I studied it, the more it got down to really there were these 4 parts which historically have been used to talk about women and to tell them what they should be up to. So I go from the breasts to the boobs. So start with what you can see. Although even there, of course, as we all know, you can enhance your breasts, you can uplift your breasts. It's not as if anything really as fixed as all that. Once you get to the womb, you're talking about an organ which couldn't be seen, which had to be imagined for many, many centuries. All sorts of things associated with that.
So let's start with breasts. One of the points you made about them is that there's often a tension between seeing and receiving something and the consensual. How far back does that tension?
I think that goes back a long way. So even the earliest days of medicine, Western Europe, there was the idea that breast milk was actually a therapeutic product. And you still find a lot today with sections of conjunctivitis, like listen to the health warning. But in the past, it was used for a range of conditions. There were even ideas like if you were suckling a boy, your breast milk is a high quality, if you were suckling a girl, so it could cure more things. But then, you have the idea of how do you take breast milk and put it in the direction of the woman. So then you get a situation where you have historical accounts of men actually suckling from their ovaries as a health food. So on a basis of saying that
I'm actually just thinking how much fun this is. What implications for the people whilst we're doing the research?
absolutely true. Breast is the most surprising chapter in many ways, because I haven't really worked with breasts before. I've done some gynecological reproductive stuff, but to find out the breasts look like so bizarre. And then also the fact that men can produce breast milk. If you look at Clemax Noble, which is the performance of bacteria, if you happen to be a man, it produces milk. Plus there are things like accessory breasts, which sounds a lot like a sort of Gucci handbag, where you can have accessory tissue, breast tissue, somewhere else in your body, and can go for extension. Male or female, and produce milk from this breast tissue on the inside of the body. And there are historical accounts of that, and there are ones within the last 10 years.
Man's already more than first time. 3 minutes of us chatting. Staying with breast milk, it's led to many scientific approaches to vaccines. Tell me something that makes you good at breast milk work for the same thing? I love it.
Yeah, so the idea, this goes back to the ancient Greeks, the idea was that your blood is conducted from cold in your body into other fluids. If you're a woman, you're colder than men. And that's the direction of your cold to touch. It means your lipids are working in a colder way, you're not cooking so well. So women could cook their blood with fluids, and it would become breast milk. So they knew the channels at the breasts. There's that something is out of reach and not really known to men, it's been there a long, long time. And there are terms for it like whortleberry, which go back a really, really long way.
Yeah, the language, you focus on the language, how each of these body parts have many different names, and like you mentioned myrtleberry, another one for clitoris, you mentioned a few, the little tongue, chickpea,
Yep.
Why is the language important?
I think it's very interesting when you think about our language, we talk about things like vagina, as if that's good scientific language, but of course it isn't. In Latin terms, it means sheath or scabbard, so it's still got the idea of putting the penis in the vagina. It's not a neutral term, although we think it is. But the language we use for women's bodies, often flowers and fruits, sounds really quite attractive in many ways. To think of your parts in terms of, my little rosebud, it's actually a much more beautiful name than using a Latinated term. But then often that's connected with the idea of fragility. That women's bodies are fragile, women's sexuality is fragile. If you touch a rosebud too soon, the petals will fall off. It's that sort of image. So it's actually can be spun positively, or a richer way of looking at the body, but also it can be used in a way that makes women very cautious about their sexuality.
You talk about a man called Matteo Lealdo Colombo.
Oh yes.
Now, he's often credited with discovering the truth. Who was it?
It's a great passage. So this is a medic, 1559, published a book on the body, on the parts of the body, and he says in a sort of very confidential way, this thing, it's like a little rectangle, and if you touch it, even with just your little finger, women go wild, and their seed goes out in all directions. And you think, whoa, you just discovered the clitoris in 1559. I don't think you did. But at the same time, 1540s, 1550s, you've got other anatomists. This is the era of dissection. And they're saying, well, I've had a look and I can't find it. And one of the most famous anatomists of all, Andreas Vesalius, wrote, well, I found it, but it's just like it's a sport of nature. It's a freaky thing. Yes, sometimes you find a woman one, but they're not normal. So to say, wow, I found it, and you just touch it, but then who touches it? In his case, this is actually him as the doctor, live, hands-on, with the body. This is not modern studies of the body where you need these things like MRI to work out what's going on. This is hands-on. So if you touch it with your little finger, who touches it? What if she touches it? And it starts to get a little bit risky in terms of whether women amongst us.
Quello. No, Lorenzo, quello. Sì, stupido. Ma come ti permetti? Quindi no, ti parli così. Ma che fai? Dimmi cosa fai? Non fai queste cose. Ma cavati dentro. Io non so fatte. Cava. Terrible. Like your father. Not as terrible, I think. I will go ahead, stupido. Thank you, Lorenzo. All my correspondence complete. And strange against the skin. His heart in my hand. You're looking away, Jane. What a weak stomach you have. How did you get it?
I wrote and said how this divides us, all his friends, and how that would have broken Vic.
And that worked. I have had some correspondence with Sir Timothy, well, from his lawyer. We need to be careful about what we say about this now. It is clear that I will need time. I established an or so. So his work is remembered just his work. What his whole life is about, and not derogatory gossip. His work, his achievements will be reflected in his reputation tarnished, and this review looks at Timothy on the powers. C. He already threatens to suppress publication of his poetry, so I will need to do this, and this will now be my life's work. There was no suicide, he was happy.
So we lied. Doesn't that go against everything he believed in?
If the work isn't published, then it won't exist at all. Dead. Yes, so but in the face of deceit, in the face of fever and disease, in the face of nature, nothing was achieved. Nature threatens us all. So if nothing,
Talking about it, you were talking about despair.
Shelley's Heart by Hattie Bailey. Mary was played by Olivia Bennet, Jane by Kerry Goodison, and Lorenza by Flaminia Chico. Lorenzo was played by Luca Malagrino, Trelawney by Massimiliano Cervi, and Shelley by Jack Hamlet. The director was Emma Harding for BBC Audio in Wales.
BBC News at 3 o'clock. Environmental campaigners have said government plans to clean up the water industry are window dressing. A new bill unveiled today would give the regulator increased powers to tackle pollution in England and Wales, including banning bonuses and jailing water company bosses. But Matt Staniak, who's the manager of the campaign group Save Windermere, is critical.
I just think what's been announced today just simply isn't good enough, and it's not going to actually create significant change in supply. They're not going to create any material difference on the ground. Current laws are being enforced, so why would these be any different?
A member of the Royal Navy has died in a helicopter crash in the Channel. Minister of Defence said it happened during a night flying exercise with HMS Queen Elizabeth. No one else was killed or seriously injured. The government has promised to speed up the removal of dangerous cladding following yesterday's report on the Grenfell Tower disaster which killed 72 people in 2017. The Housing Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner said it was unacceptable people were still living in buildings covered in combustible materials 7 years on from the fire. Police in the southern German city of Munich have shot and killed an armed man close to an institute that documents Nazi history and the Israeli consulate building. The man has been identified by police as an 18-year-old Austrian national who was injured in an exchange of fire with officers. The Ugandan Olympic athlete Rebecca Cheptegei has died 4 days after being doused in petrol and set on fire by her former boyfriend. Local reports argued about property. The competition watchdog is looking at whether the sale of Oasis tickets breached consumer protection laws. Dynamic pricing led standard tickets for the new event were more than double from the petrol day parts to fine Ticketmaster. Competition and Markets Authority said that was not itself unlawful, but businesses disparity.
Hello, I'm Andy Zoltan. In the new series of the News Wizard, I'm bantering the trampoline. It's a scientifically proven fact that you can't be class on the trampoline, so I bomb my mind to calm down whenever I'm annoyed by the news. Hopefully, over the next couple of months, I'll use this panel system to help me cut down to just 10 hours battery per day from my phone 23. Tune in to the new series of News Quiz to find out. Friday at 6:30 comedy on Radio 4 and BBC Sound.
He suffers for his art, doesn't he? Later this hour, Michael Rosen blasts off to explore the language of outer space. His fellow traveller is Colonel Chris Hampton, who flew several missions and captained the International Space Station. He talks about how astronauts communicate, the special language they use that he dubs NASA speak. Automobile arrives at about 3:30. First on Radio 4, Open Country takes us on the Hebridean Whale Trail on the island of Mull to learn about citizen science and responsible wildlife watching.
This is the harbour at Tobermory on the island of Mull. This week, Open Country is here to find out how the balance between tourism and nature is being preserved by people working on the island who want to encourage people to see the things they've come to see, such as sea eagles, whales and otters, but also to respect and protect them. My name's Morgan and I am the Communications Manager at the Hebridean Whale Dolphin Club.
My name's Sadie, I'm the Education and Sightings Officer at the Hebridean Whale Dolphin Club. We collect sightings data on whales, dolphins, porpoises and basking sharks, and the goal for that is to understand the presence and absence of these animals in our waters. So we're on the path here to the Tobermory Lighthouse at Donegal. It is one of our Hebridean wheelchair sites. So the Hebridean wheelchair is a network. It's relatively calm today, so the conditions are perfect for spotting. You can look down here to see the coastline of Mull, the Bay, Ardmore, the peninsula here, and then the sound of Mull out up ahead. And next up we have Ardmore Peninsula, and that follows round up the coast into Sumac, the mountains here, and up into Sumac.
好長啊要。
From that
特別非洲唔中意嗰啲風。 你想爸爸山村同爸爸講？How important do you think it is then with the work that you're doing, which is the citizen science approach? How important is that to get across to people rather than just sheer chasing the thrill?
Yeah, I think it's hugely important. Like, we obviously have Siberia in our research vessel where people can come aboard and take part in the citizen science, become marine mammal scientists, but that's just one boat. And we can't be everywhere, so having, we've got 6,000 registered users on Whaletrack. Having those eyes on the sea across Scotland is hugely important, and if those people are reporting everything that they're seeing and not just sharing it in their local cycling group so that everyone can sort of see that, they are then not only enjoying that sighting and helping other people and inspiring other people, they are also contributing hugely to science and the protection of these animals. What's amazing is just the scientists. So even if you're sitting with a customer participate, if you can show them you've got much data in another area where we're seeing nothing there compared to an area where we're always seeing something, you've got then that evidence to show that actually this area is really one, this area this is one that should be protected and considered more. So yeah, that absence data is still hugely important, and it just means we've had a lovely day out which you can see that people can see anything in the country. Yeah. Like that one lot of it, which you can see. But that's the beauty of bird watching. Sometimes you pick up some winter and it's just about unfortunately the fact that well than that expectation.
Documentary was produced by Maggie Mayer. It was BBC Audio Bristol production.
Cái ba của
Now Claire Bowling is for on behalf of Access Sport.
It's the Paralympic Games in Paris. This week, 12 days of world's finest athletes. It's a much needed positive representation of disabled people. An event I just love presenting. Working on since 2024 years. It's a reminder that taking part in sport changes lives. Everyone's lives. Mine included. I was definitely influenced hugely by growing up, learning to ride ponies and horses and falling off and having to get back on again. And I genuinely think it's helped me cope with life in general. But there are still barriers that disabled people face when trying to be active. Research says only 1 in 4 disabled people in England have the opportunity to be as active as they want to be.
So that's too many people missing out on all the sport brings, the mental health benefits, the life skills, and that wonderful sense of belonging to a team. And this is what Access Sport wants to change. It's warm-up time at Safe Haven Basketball Club in London. This club holds sessions for disabled young people aged between 14 and 25, including Grace, who has autism. Growing up in America, Grace fell in love with the game and spending all her time on the court. Basketball gave her an emotional outlet and helped her forge friendships. When her family moved back to London, there wasn't an inclusive club for her to go to, and that's why her mum, Emma, decided to set one up. Emma reached out to Access Sport, a charity covered the cost of booking basketball games and paying for experienced coaches to run regular sessions. As experts in community sport, they also provide training and support for Emma, always being there to answer any questions she might have. 8 years on, Safe Haven has expanded, with 3 locations hosting around 50 disabled young people every week. This is one of over 500 clubs Access Sport supports across the UK. Your donation today will help keep these clubs open to disabled young people. To donate, just search online for BBC Radio 4 Appeal or call 0800 404 8144. Or you can write a cheque to Access Sport and send it to Free Post, BBC Radio 4 Appeal. That's the whole address. Free Post, BBC Radio 4 Appeal. And importantly, please mark the back of your envelope with Access Sport. Thank you so much.
There will be. The number again, 0800 404 8144. Calls are free from landlines and mobiles. You can find all the details for giving online. Just search for BBC Radio 4 Appeal. If you're a UK taxpayer and would like Access Sport to pay a gift aid on your donation, please include an email or postal address.
Knowledge has transformed
Yeah.
our understanding of the universe and ourselves. But ideas are unique. Is just
Really?
as important.
Okay.
Any new creative endeavour basically begins in ignorance.
A new series
Also, I know
exploring the
about
power
it,
of ignorance, from art to science to politics.
Okay.
To have in the back of your mind that whatever I believe
Okay.
may in fact be wrong, because that opens me up to being receptive to other viewpoints. The long history of
big company
Just QAnon with me, Rory Stewart, on BBC
Okay.
Radio 4. Available now
Pretty
on
sure.
BBC Sounds.
Yeah.
Now on Radio 4, we've a glimpse into the life of an astronaut in word of mouth.
Hello, have you ever seen the film Gravity? The stars are Sandra Bullock and George Clooney. Most of the film is set in space. The 2 main characters are astronauts. Without spoiling the plot, the core of the film is about a disaster. Will Bullock or Clooney survive? There's a key moment in the film when it seems as if all is lost. But Clooney arrives on the scene and we see and hear him talking to Bullock. But is it? Or is Bullock dreaming? Whether it's real or not, the crucial moment comes when Clooney gives Bullock some vital information that will enable her to survive. But as I say, is it real? So what's happening here is a crucial communication moment. Somehow or another, Bullock receives information on how to survive, get back to Earth, and get home. If it's real, then didn't Clooney do well? If it's not real,